I think that if I were to wish anything for the folks that are listening, is to have the courage to try something that others haven't, especially when it's grounded in good intention, an informed hunch, or a desire to just shake it up a little bit. I think that society, business, cultures, companies, countries, they die and wither with inaction. And this is not a time to not act.
And when somebody tries something a little different and it works really well, then there are 1,000 other businesses that say, "Oh, we want to do that thing because that's different." Well, that's not different anymore. You have to come up with your own version of different. Welcome to the Leadership Disrupted podcast. One of our listeners left a comment recently saying that she listens every week just to remind herself that great leadership is a thing to think about. It isn't just automatic, especially in today's world. And so I just want you to know that I feel a responsibility week after week to bring you things deeply to think about, to nudge your brain, to help us all evolve to be better leaders that the world needs today and into the future. And so today, our very special guest is Cat Holt, and she's going to give us plenty to think about. For any successful business, brand is a critical asset, of course. Leaders envision the brand, they nurture the brand, they protect the brand, and Cat Holt is a maestro of brand. She's the architect behind one of the most enduring and beloved campaigns in insurance history, Dr. Rick for Progressive Insurance. With a rare blend of strategic rigor and creative soul, Cat has helped legacy brands evolve, challenger brands emerge, and leadership teams navigate the unknown. Today, as president and CEO of Koolagi, she brings that same clarity and courage to companies facing transformation, uncertainty, or opportunity. So welcome, Cat, first of all. And based on that introduction, are there any gaps you'd like to fill or any initial information you'd like to share about who you are and what you do before we deep dive into all things brand?
Well, I'm a Leo and I've got 3 teenage daughters, and I really like to play guitar and sing, but otherwise you got it.
So then the question I want to ask you to start with is, what do most people get wrong about brand?
I think it's just the scope of their thinking about what brand means. Too often we find that people believe that a brand is the logo or a name or color palettes, sometimes even a creative campaign. And those things contribute to brand. But when we're talking about brand, we're really talking about understanding how can a company position itself in the marketplace, deliver experiences that deliver on a promise that people or audiences want to engage with. And then also it's the stories people tell about you and the feelings that they have. And the truth is 9 times out of 10, brand really isn't in our control. All we can do is kind of nudge it and plant some seeds and hope that garden grows.
So does your work focus exclusively on business brand, business or nonprofit organizational branding? Because there are other uses of the term brand. There's personal brand, there's professional brand, there's leadership brand. That term gets used in a lot of different ways. Even in our own business, we have a course called Your Personal Leadership Brand that's designed to help people really think through, how am I showing up? What promises am I keeping? Like when people hear my name and think of me as a leader, what are the instant connections that are made because of their experiences of me as a leader? So it's using the brand phrase as kind of an analogy. But I guess what's the overall scope of the work that you do with organizations?
Well, it's a great question because of the rise of that notion of personal branding. And of course, that came to the forefront because of the user-generated content environment that we live in and the ability for individuals to broadcast their own story or image of who they are via social channels that don't require mass media or the press or some of the other disintermediaries that we used to have to navigate. The other reason why it's really interesting is because if you actually think about what can help a brand, a company, build its reputation in the marketplace, it is giving the mic to some of the leaders that are helping to define the future of that organization or to help reinforce the culture of that organization, or that expectation of leadership, right? What is it that we're asking our people to do? And because of that, it's kind of blurring a little bit. And so the way I think about it is, when we're creating something like a thought leadership platform for an organization, we have to look at first what that company is trying to do, and the fingerprints of those leaders are going to be there. But then we have to also think about what role does a leader play? Because you want to make sure that you understand how these things can work together. And the truth is that, there's not a long tenure for some executives these days, right? If you think about CMOs, they're not staying for more than 18 months, 20, 24 months. And so that person's personal brand has a likelihood of walking away from the organization, and the organization's brand has to stay. And so it's a little bit of a recipe to understand in what way and how, so that both can have the best front possible. Because at the end of the day, if we're on social, if you're on LinkedIn and you're trying to go to a conference, you don't want to meet with a company. You're meeting with a person, and we still kind of want that one-on-one interaction. And so organizations that are doing something like a thought leadership have to really understand, well, how can I make this work for me right now, but also be ready for the future?
So I know of more than a few organizations that have decided we're going to be thought leaders in this space. And then they start out, and it turns out being an actual thought leader in almost any space is hard work. And once they realize it's hard work, this won't surprise you. Someone will have the bright idea, well, let's use AI to help augment our thought leadership. And it starts with augment our thought leadership. And then pretty soon it's AI is our thought leadership. And AI, God bless it. God bless, and I'm an active user. I know I'm gonna sound like the old man on the porch shaking my cane saying, damn AI, but that's not true. I leverage AI very judiciously and carefully. But AI does not create ideas for me. It doesn't create the angle for me. It doesn't create insight for me. But because I know what it's like, I've seen organizations that suddenly they're posting a lot on LinkedIn, and everything is good, but kind of bland, or everything is perfect or too perfect, or everything is just you can kind of, I'm sure you find this to be true. You can kind of smell it when it's a primarily AI driven campaign or message or article, whatever, or post, whatever it might be. So I know I'm dumping a lot on you. Does any of that prompt any interesting?
Yeah, for sure. So I also love AI. I know that's slightly controversial in the world of marketing and advertising. But here's why I love it. And then I'm completely going to agree with you that thought leadership that's only generated through AI is not, in fact, leadership at all. So if we think about AI, I love it because my analogy has been, you have to know how to ride a bike. And if you ride bikes and you like to go down the wooded paths or along the sides of the road, you still have to know the basics of riding a bike. You have to have the destination in mind. But the best thing about riding an electric bike is you can go further and you can go faster. And that allows for you to see more of the world and explore it. But you still know where you're going, and you still have to know how to ride a bike. And so the way I've been thinking about this is, you do the thing that you know already. You just do it faster, more effectively. You're able to get more accomplished in a shorter period of time. It can't think for you, right? One of the frontiers that still is unavailable. And for my case, and I'm sure yours, I hope it continues to be, is this notion of AI creating strategies for companies, particularly if you're looking to create a strategy that hasn't been done before. Because if you take a look at the data set that most of the AI engines are using, I'm not talking about looking at, bespoke knowledge lakes that have some kind of unique sovereignty and other kinds of rules that we mean that they have information that the others don't. Most of these things, whether it's Gemini or Copilot or ChatGPT, it's using the internet. And so when it's going and answering a question for you or writing a summary for you, two things are happening. Number one, it can only use the information that's already available.
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully, actually, because sometimes that doesn't happen. I'll come back to that. And then the other thing is, there is a cap for how much information it's going to crawl, bring in, synthesize, and then create something using generative AI. How it decides on how to do that is going to be based on the usage population and, frankly, what's available and not protected. I think I just saw a recent study that said a lot of it is coming from places like Reddit or other conversational boards. And I think that has to do with the fact that there's a lot of user-generated content. There are a lot of perspectives that are there, and it's not necessarily IP protected.
Mm-hmm.
So, we have to be a little bit cautious around that, because it's going to state what has been true, not will be true next. And it's going to come from a very limited perspective. And I said I was going to come back to one thing. It also does weird things. So, it wants to answer our question. And so it will make things up, which of course we know is called the hallucination factor.
Yeah, sure.
And I've run into this a couple of times. And so you have to be careful, particularly if you're trying to use it for thought leadership, to fact check. And I always talk about it in terms of creating experiences using AI that are auditable and then also like confirmable, right? Can we take a look at it? Can we confirm that this is actually right? So I don't think that people should be using AI for their thought leadership if you don't have a roadmap, if you don't have a strategy, and if you aren't bringing your unique perspective to the forefront. I think that that's just a lot more clutter and noise and information for information's sake. It's not going to advance your cause. Yeah.
And unique voice in expressing that perspective. Because part of, if you're going to be a thought leader, part of what draws people to you is, of course, your unique ideas. Yes, there's that. And then there's the way that you express them. There's that voice that draws people in and feels like, I do think there's a hunger for human thought leadership, genuine, unique thought leadership. And every now and then I come across someone who is just crackles with originality. And and even if the particular subject isn't all that interesting, the fact that they crackle with originality grabs me, and I follow them, because it's increasingly rare.
And I'm located in the Boston, Massachusetts area. I'm down in the Rhode Island area, but it's essentially the same network. I was born outside of Boston. And there's that old saying about, the revolution and Boston being able to protect its shores from the invading English army. And they went north, west, and south with riders calling out the alarm. But the only people that ended up coming to arms and fighting were on Paul Revere's path. Because even though they all had the same information, he delivered it in a way that people took notice and then took action. And so it's not just about the information, but as you say, it's about how you deliver it, and can you pull people in with a story that they're going to care about ultimately.
Do you have any examples, or an example of a company you've worked with where you've helped them do exactly that? Kind of think through, how do we want to show up? What is our brand? And then how do we want to express that in a way that grabs people and keeps them?
I in some ways, that's what I've been doing my entire career. I have the great fortune of working on a fantastic project in the early days of content creation, which was for Liberty Mutual. It was while I was at Hill Holiday, an agency in Boston. We launched Responsibility, What's Your Policy? This was before the emu and yellow and all the stuff that you see today. And we ended up creating branded content as part of that, because they knew that they weren't going to be able to outspend the likes of Geico or Progressive. And so how do you essentially create this beacon that attracts folks that are like-minded, right? So there's some kind of cultural affinity. But even more important in that instance, we were tapping into something, and this was a minute ago, right? So this is at the forefront. This was in 2005, 2006. And what we were doing was tapping into the forefront of a voice that wasn't really being given the microphone, which was people who try really hard just to kind of do the right thing in their lives, to teach their kids to do the right thing. But those stories weren't really being seen, because that was when we had the Paris Hiltons of the world and the Richies of the world. And what was being celebrated was misbehaving and brashness and what looked like self-indulgence and actions that had zero care for other people. So when this content came into place, and it was in the form of shorts, and we did collaborations with producers and directors, and it ended up turning into teaching moments for schools. We actually got a lot of teachers and actually religious organizations writing and saying, could we please, use this and create something where it's a class, because it's a really good way to help people understand that they're part of something greater. Fast forward to today, and I think what we're finding is when you don't have that instinct among somebody within your marketing organization, your communications organization, or even in your executive suite, it kind of doesn't matter how clever we are in coming up with something, because if they can't meet you toe to toe in the delivery of it, it's just not going to do what everybody hopes to do. And frankly, the sadness of it, having done it, and there were many times we were able to do it right. It was easier to do it when we didn't have to involve executives, because executives don't feel comfortable with being that kind of thought leader. There are a few exceptions, but oftentimes we're just asked to keep them out of the press, not put them into the press. And I think we often find that they just don't want to spend the time. It feels like too much work, too much time. And so we've had to do a lot of, we did one for Parker Hannafin that had to do with engineering and looking at it more from a line of business versus looking at it from a product line. It's an industrial a global manufacturing organization. This was for another agency I worked at. And we ended up having to do all the research and the work, because we had hoped to have some of the input from the folks that were doing the product design or working in those industries with their customers. And they just didn't want to contribute. It worked fine, but it could have been so much better. And so it has to be a good partnership for it to work well.
Well, and I imagine, given all the time that you put into the brand message, the brand identity, what you hope for, what you depend on, is that the organization can actually make good on whatever that is. So if the brand is a fun and exciting restaurant experience, when people show up to the restaurant, it had better be fun and exciting. Or if whatever the thinking is that goes into the brand has to ultimately not just grab attention, but actually reflect a promise that the company can in fact make good on, which of course is not always true. And I think I've spoken with a fair number of leaders who think of brand building as lead generation. Hey, we just want to grab eyeballs. We want to grab people's attention, and if we can get leads in our pipeline, then we've accomplished the goal. But in fact, what grabbed me about you was that your thinking regarding brand goes so much deeper in terms of the brand is us. The brand reflects us. And so when a particular type of person or entity is drawn to our brand, it's the kind of person who's going to be thrilled with the work that we do, or whatever solutions we provide. And that inherently means not everybody.
Well, exactly. And I think that becomes scary for a lot of executives too, because it feels like I'm leaving something on the table.
Yeah.
But the truth is nobody can be good at everything, or they certainly can't be good at everything all at once. And so knowing who you're for and who you're not for is extremely important, and being confident with that. And you can measure it too, right? Like I'm working with a client right now. They provide auto financing. It's not for everybody. It's for a segment of auto financing. There's conversation about whether or not it should be for everybody. But I take a look at the people who provide financing for everybody. And you're talking about the city groups and the Ally and Bank of America. They have massive marketing budgets. They have massive retail distribution locations.
Yeah.
They are already have one financial product in the wallets of the folks that are looking for auto lending. So by going and focusing on something that's a smaller segment, you're able to focus your efforts onto a place. And until you have number 1, 2, or 3 position with that segment, you still have a lot of work to do to win that game. And it's work that should be done, because it's going to yield for them something that the other big guys can't afford to do, because the segment isn't part of their growth strategy to the degree it is for my client's organization.
Right. And what's the old phrase? You don't want to boil the ocean, or try to,
Yeah.
or if you're trying to boil the ocean, you'd better have a budget that gives you enough fire to boil the ocean.
It's funny that you're saying that, because when I was at Progressive, you had mentioned the Dr. Rick campaign.
Yeah.
I had worked on another that was looking at ways through branded content to create a relationship and a preference and affinity that didn't use traditional channels, because, younger generations aren't necessarily watching television like they were before. And they like to seek out and find. And so in order to essentially help the organization understand that, because it really is, even though it goes direct, it's a mass marketing organization.
Yeah.
I wrote a white paper and I called it the pond experiment. And it was exactly that. I said, if you throw a rock into the ocean, you're not going to see the ripple. We have to make a pond so that when we throw that rock, we can measure the ripple. And that's about good test design. It's about knowing who you're going after and how to focus your programs, the creative, the spend, the measurement, so that you can have enough fidelity to be able to pick up on those early signs of change and motion moving forward. And I think that's a lost art today as well.
So for business leaders today who are thinking about today and let's say the near future, the next 3 to 5 years, what are you seeing in the overall media landscape that creates challenges? Because the word that comes to mind for me is just noise. So much noise. Social media, news media, entertainment media, and we don't always know which is which. Social media actually turns out to be business media, or news media turns out to be marketing media. And we're overwhelmed not only with information, but misinformation, news and fake news, marketing campaigns and fake marketing campaigns, products that are what they say they are, and a lot of products that are not what they say they are. We're awash in all of this. So I guess, number one, what are you seeing in the overall media environment that business leaders should be aware of? And then how do you help them cut through?
That's an excellent question. And I will guarantee that I'll answer it now, and in 6 to 8 months, it'll all change, which is why I love doing this, but it might feel a little daunting to the leaders that are listening or watching. I think the first and foremost is, I was having a conversation with a campaign manager for an election that I've been talking with. And, typically speaking, when you think about political campaigns, there's a saying that says, no campaign manager ever got fired for running on television. But I typically don't actually recommend that for my clients because they typically don't have the budgets to be able to do what they're trying to do with what I call dumb media. And so where we have to really be focusing is the ability for us to find people at a super hyper targeted segmented level, even if there's a 20 or 30% margin of error, which is true because you can't be 100% perfect. There are data sets that we don't have access to. We call them the walled gardens. And unless you have very large budgets and then engage in a very advanced data agreement where you have a third party matching data sets and it's double blinded, that's not most business people's budget levels or needs, frankly. And so what you have to remember is two things. Number one is we can get in front of people in any digital way possible, and we can really focus on specific individuals, whether it's a known audience or a lookalike audience or a behavioral or contextual audience. But that doesn't guarantee we're going to win that impression, because everything that we're buying, whether it is for connected television or OTT or video or streaming or the audio world, podcast world, digital out of home, you're bidding on a marketplace. And Johnny over here might be important to me because I'm going after this very specific tiny segment. But Johnny's also going to be important to Coca-Cola and to Tide and to Progressive. And if he's more valuable to them and they're willing to spend more on that impression or that action, they're going to win and I'm not going to, or your brand is not going to. And it's fluid. And so I think that the notion of I can control the spend, I can control who sees it, and I'm going to be able to know without a fraction of a doubt that my dollars went to where they needed to go, when I needed it to go, with the frequency and reach I needed. It just doesn't work that way. In aggregate, we can get there. But oftentimes I have a lot of executive leaders that want to have more of that direct linkage. And there are very many layers in the marketing technology stack that prevent us from being able to get all the way down to that. And oh, by the way, Google bought one of the most important tools that we used to have in the platform called DoubleClick. And so that has gone away. And that's a whole nother thing that even the courts are looking at right now. And in fact, if you haven't looked into it, or you're not, if you're running digital media as a company, it might make sense for you to take a look at that, because it starts to paint the landscape that we're trying to operate in. And if these big companies are going to take away our tools to be able to have auditability, confirming, it's going to be very difficult for us moving forward. So I think that's one component that we're talking about.
And so let me play executive leader with you. And I'm going to imagine, I don't know that this is true, but I'm going to imagine this gets said every now and then. We need to find a way to go viral. So how do we go viral?
Yeah, so people still do. Oftentimes it's for a thing like Coldplay Gate, where they really didn't. In fact, people love to share bad news faster than good news. And so,
although didn't that company actually turn it into a positive? What was the name of it? It was Astronomer was the name of the company.
Yeah, it was Astronomer.
And Astronomer actually hired Gwyneth Paltrow for like one ad or something. So they got their 5 minutes of fame from that.
Yes, and they were, so in our world, we take a look at speed to response when something bad happens, because then we can say, oh, you don't have a reputation management, crisis management plan in place, right? And so you take a look at how long it took them to respond and take action. That was time that was going to erode because people really didn't know who they were. So the first impression out there was negative. And so they hired, and to be honest, I haven't even seen that. It's shame on me. I never saw it also, which is also an indication, right? So what press, how is it being shared, is another food for thought. But that's clever and brilliant idea on them. But I think the biggest thing for us to remember is that all of these platforms where you want to go viral, they're monetization platforms. They only have two main interests. One is to make sure you and I stay engaged and don't go anywhere, which I know from my teenage girls. Sometimes I'm looking and it's just like, is there a sign of life there? Because they're just spacing out. And there's a ton of studies that show that we are getting more stupid because of this, right? But they want us to stay. They want us to be sticky. The other thing they want to do is make money from our eyeballs. And so when you think about the notion of viral, for you to go viral, you have to be able to have people staying, engaging, sharing, spreading within the first 24 hours. I would argue the first couple of hours of you putting that content out there. And then you're going to have a situation in which they somehow feel like they can make money from that. 9 times out of 10, probably 99.9 times out of 100, they're not going to allow for you to have a free impression in front of eyeballs because they would rather charge you in order for the right to be able to get in front of eyeballs. And it doesn't matter. I mean, I was managing the social at Progressive, I was in charge of the social media management team. We had over 2 million folks following Flow on Facebook. This was a couple of years ago, many years ago. And it kind of didn't matter. We're still only getting 100 people liking something. And that's because, the folks that are within your tribe that are following your content, they're only seeing a fraction of what you're putting out there unless they're engaging and they can identify.
So the Facebook algorithm wasn't just saying, all right, you got 2 million, so everything you post gets seen by 2 million people.
Oh, God, no. And it's been declining.
So they control that, because if they control it, then they can monetize it to say, however, Progressive, if you want to pay 3 cents per impression, we'll get you 500,000 of your
I mean, if it was 3 cents, I'd be doing it. That would be nice.
Whatever the number.
No, I know. I'm just teasing you.
Yeah.
And
I didn't realize that. So I've been thinking, I'm sitting here with about 30,000 LinkedIn followers. Dan's little brain thinks, well, okay, I post something and 30,000 LinkedIn followers see it. But no, LinkedIn needs some moolah from me. Okay.
Well, it may not just be moolah, because there are some people that you see time and again. The things that rise it to it's almost like graduating to more and more eyeballs. And the algorithms don't wait very long, because they all are primed to share, promote, and populate the things that are the newest. And so you don't have a lot of time for the thing that you posted to be picked up and go viral. And what it tends to do is it looks at the first, I don't even know what the time period is anymore. It's like an hour, 2 hours, 4 hours. It's very small. And they looks for commenting, engagement, sharing, liking, that kind of behavior. And if they're seeing it, then they're going to open it up to more people.
Okay. All right.
The other benefit of that engagement is the people who engaged with that content, their personal followers and networks are going to start to see it, because that's what the lookalike modeling is. Well, if I like something and I'm friends with you, Dan, then chances are you like the same things that I do, or at least there's an overlap. And so the algorithm says, well, if Kat liked it, Dan might too. We'll share it with you. If you like it, then it's going to look for more people that are like you and I, and more people that might be at the intersection of who follows us. And so it kind of graduates.
This is why every podcast host starts the podcast with, hey, press that like button and smash that subscribe button. Like they're trying to drive action quickly.
It's a signal that then the algorithms can use to help show more people your content. I know when we first started talking before we were recording, you were saying the rule of thumb is 6 months of consistent content before you're going to start to see a lot of people following a podcast. Well, there are a couple of reasons for that. One is absolutely that you need to grow up a bit of an organic following so they can start to understand what kind of person they should recommend it next to. But they're also not going to waste time if you don't make it past 6 months. Right. And so you have to kind of prove that if they give you the ability to be in front of the people who are following you or others like them, that you're going to be consistent with that kind of content. Because again, all they want is for you to stay in the platform.
I am still working through my emotional resistance to asking people to like me, or like the podcast, particularly at the very beginning, because the logical engineer part of my brain says, well, they haven't even seen it yet. You can't ask people to like the episode until they've seen the episode. But that's, again, I get, now that you're saying it this way, I get why there's that emphasis, because you want to create that activity quickly, so the algorithm says, oh yeah, people are liking this, and it may end up sharing it with others who have similar characteristics.
That's right. That's right.
Um,
Yeah.
so
So I
then
know that can sound frustrating, but
there's so many
it's a
layers to this.
reality.
You must have very complex conversations with clients, because everything that you've just described, for every single product or service, it's got to be like a different conversation, different nuances, deciding which audience do you really want to target. Your products may, this is me making this up, tell me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, go for
The
it.
products may be relevant to a wider audience, but in terms of your marketing plan or your brand, you may decide we're actually going to brand for this specific audience because it's more actionable. We can get and keep this audience and be more likely to go viral or whatever if we pick a lane, choose a lane, and then stick with it for a while.
Always, every time. You're going to get sick of that approach before anyone else does.
Mm-hmm.
Because you're going to see your own marketing far more frequently than anyone else does. So there's a magical number that's somewhere between 6 and 8 that is true across B2B as well as direct to consumer, all different kinds of categories, which is the number of times your brand and some kind of messaging has to be in front of a person to get them to go from, I don't know anything about who you are, to I want to take action.
Yeah.
And the window that we have for that is absurdly short often. And so you need to make sure you have enough at-bats, which can be done through paid media. And we talk about that in terms of reach and frequency. Reach is what percentage of the audience that you're going after are you going to be able to go after? Frequency, what's the average number of times they're going to see your message within the given time frame that you're talking about? Typically, we're talking about either weekly or monthly, depending on the kind of purchase cycle there is. But most decisions are made within 24 hours of doing research.
Do you have any clients who consciously court controversy? They're making a point to be edgy, borderline inappropriate?
So, when you choose a marketing partner, it's also about kind of like-mindedness. And so my whole background, I'm an artist by background. I was a painter, I was a musician. I studied psychology at Brown, went into advertising right away because I went to my advisor and I said, I don't think I could sit being in a room with somebody week after week talking about the same problems over and over again, because I'm a get it done kind of person. And I think that would be like Dante's inner circle of hell for me. And he said, well, you're artistic and you know psychology, you should go and do this. And so for me, I bring myself to the table. And I founded Koolagi 4 years ago because there were things about corporate America that didn't work for my ethos and my moral compass. And so I founded it with this notion, I want to do good work with good people. And oftentimes that means I'm trying to find a way to combine all efforts so there's an element of betterment, right? And so when we think about the responsibility project that I mentioned about Liberty Mutual, that was my first big foray into it. Because the notion is everybody's out here talking about these things, but there are other people. Can we just reinforce it somehow? Can we reinforce it's okay to do good? to do
Mhm.
the thing that's the right thing to do. And so, I've done that over and over again. And I think that because I'm looking to do good work with good people, I tend not to have those kinds of clients because that's just not my jam.
Sure.
It doesn't mean it doesn't happen. I mean, there are a lot of people that make a lot of money from that. It's just not the thing I want to do.
Well, it's interesting you say that because I've talked to a few marketing consultants about the Leadership Disrupted podcast, and I start with just explaining the vibe of the podcast, which is just having interesting conversations with interesting people, not necessarily creating viral moments, not necessarily courting controversy, not always the most exciting, hyperbolic conversations, because the target audience tends to be people like me who are just interested in the topic and who believe that leadership is evolving or that it needs to evolve. So let's just talk our way through it. We don't have to have all the answers right now because we don't have all the answers right now. But that's a certain kind of person. I'll call them leadership nerds. So, so when I say that, the marketing consultants have tried to give me advice on how to create controversial conversations, how to be edgy, or how to create viral moments. And I've had to say, you just said, that's not my jam. I've had to say, that's not my jam.
Yeah.
I don't mind being edgy if it comes naturally, but it doesn't,
Believe me, I can be controversial, but it's always in this notion of just being honest about what will work and won't.
yeah,
And I think that I tend not to mince my words around that because I respect your time, you respect mine.
yeah,
Let's get to it. And either this is going to work or it's not. I'm not looking to chase the ambulance to get the dollars here. I'm looking to build long-lasting relationships where people have a win-win situation. That's how I choose to lead, right? And creating a culture where there's something okay about the safety of the working partnership because we become embedded in our client's
hmm
business. I'm often a fractional CMO for them. And so their culture is going to impact my culture, and I have to protect my people so that they feel good about showing up every day and their humanity is respected. And then the other really, really important thing that's going to bring us all the way back to the beginning of this conversation is the way that I see brand is that it's the culture lived outside. I did not make up that saying. It is just something that has been a truism that I continue to believe in. And I think it's even more true in this day and age where forced transparency is a thing, right? There are whistleblowers, whether big or small, there's leaked content. And so, the beginning times for my discovery for any kind of positioning for a client, it always starts with them.
hmm
And so if your notion is you want to help leaders to navigate what is now no longer a clear path forward for leadership success in the country or even beyond, because we're in such a world that's in upheaval. It feels like strife and conflict are everywhere. My daughters talked about the fact that there's not going to be a world for them to live in, which is sad, right? And so where do you want to spend your time? Now, we just talked about bad news traveling faster,
yeah,
but it might be the difference between the tortoise and the hare, like plodding along, doing the right thing with smart lucky. That's what I call it all the time. You can be smart lucky, which is you think it's going to work this way, and then it does because you did it in an appropriate manner, and there's a time for any good idea. And so you just have to catch on to the tail of that and rise with it. But I think it's really important to know who you are and what your culture is, because at the end of the day, especially with the disintermediation that AI presents for everything, which is non-human, I honestly think this pendulum is going to switch back to human connection and
yeah,
conversation. And you have to know kind of who you are and what makes you tick, because we're getting really good at figuring out who we want on our zombie apocalypse team versus not. And so, I'd rather people know who I am and choose me for who I am than to bother with the rest.
Well, then the way you think about brand, um, correct me if I'm not connecting these dots the right way, but the way you think about brand makes brand relevant throughout the organization.
Mm-hmm.
And everyone in their own way is a brand manager. If you're in HR and you're
100%.
hiring new people, if
Yes.
you are in operations and you are producing product, if you are in customer service and you're engaging with customers, if everyone understands or has a joint understanding and a joint passion for the brand, then the brand is reflected in every aspect of your business, which I think is the answer going forward into the future. You're trying to break through.
That's right. That's my rallying cry right now. My whole purpose for being, if I'm trying to effect some kind of positive change that has less to do with, more social or humanistic side, which I'm definitely doing. It's as likely I'll have a conversation on a marketing podcast as it is on how to help rise up women and how to encourage others to get their success in life. But if I think about it, brand has become something that feels creative and transactional. And the reality is it sits at the core of the business, and it needs to be managed in the boardroom, in the executive room. And we need to be able to understand what is it and how do we measure it, to understand if we are making decisions that will allow for a brand to continue to thrive and grow. And by virtue of that, the business, or if we're doing something that's going to be damaging and we should take another look. And I think that's very important because brand strategy is a management strategy activity. Brand storytelling is marketing and creative services. And those two things fit together, and both, among many other things, comprise of your brand valuation. But organizations are not approaching it in that way.
So I'm going to be looking for your facial reaction to this question, and I'll quickly shut it down if I get any visual discomfort. But I think that the Donald Trump campaign, going back to 2016, is a masterclass in
100%.
branding.
Mm-hmm.
He identified a niche and the priorities of that niche of people, and he went down that track, and he stayed on message. He stayed on message, and the message itself was inherently controversial, so he got a lot of media, a lot of attention. Love him or hate him, he stuck with his
masterclass. Yeah,
now, the
absolutely.
big master lesson now, though, is eventually you have to make good on your promises. And I think where now we're starting to see cracks in the surface is at a certain point it can't be promise anymore. It has to be produce results. And again, I'm sorry if anyone's listening and that.
Well, you can believe in both things at the same time, right? So I think, I try to teach my children this too. My whole view on the state of things.
We love dogs, by the way, so we don't care about the dogs in the background.
I'm sorry.
No,
I don't know
totally
who's in my
fine.
front. I was hoping it was going to cancel that out. Can you pull it down when you do the mix? Or
we'll see what we can do, but we love dogs. So
I'm sorry.
No
I have
worries.
two. They're elderly. One doesn't see very well. I think she's trying to protect me. So my way of seeing this is, when you think about nature is neither evil nor good. It just is.
Mm-hmm.
And if you think about things like predator and prey, like, do you vilify the predator because it has been able to live by successfully going after prey? We kind of can't, right? And so if I think about what's happening right now, our desire to put good and bad on everything is preventing us from understanding what is the system that we are all living and operating in and must continue to nurture to move forward. And love them or hate them, this country now is very, very different than it was 20, 30, 40 years ago, 100 years ago, and so forth. And we're very tiny, we're very young still relative to the global enterprise. And so in some ways, we're going through major growing pains. And I'm not a political scientist, but I do read a lot. And the way I think about what's happening now is there were a lot of things that were being held on to as if they were precious by either side. And there was an unwillingness to break down what has always been in order to build up what we need to do next in order to serve the true needs of our population. It is shifting. Our economics have gone global. We're all interconnected. And so the way I see it is, for better or worse, this is like a wildfire. Wildfire is neither good nor bad. Things break down. But once it's over, new growth comes through. And it feels a little bit like we're in that time period. I think what's going to be the onus on all of us, whether we're acting locally or voting for folks in the next election or looking to who we hope might be our next governor or senator or president, is to understand what needs have to be met. Because Trump got here because I identified a group of people, largely rural white men, who felt like the country moved on without them. The thing that they had been promised generationally, we won't even talk about whether or not it was warranted. It was something that was expected, was no longer theirs. And they were left with no option. And they were angry. And so what Trump did is said, you guys, it stinks. You have a right to be mad. Let's get mad together, tear it all down so that we can get it back again. Now,
and it's not you.
Yeah.
And it's not me, it's them.
Well, us, them is always a play that you see in politics. I think it's much more wild for me that you have this New York City billionaire who's never, ever lived anywhere close to the communities that he's been able to tap into, nor does he understand what that's like. And yet there was a connection. Why? Because he listened and reacted and is a master at brand storytelling, which is know what you stand for, say it over and over again to the people that care the most. That's all he did. So we got to build this up again, right? We've got the White House minus an East Wing. We've got a government that's stalled. We've got a lot of people that are really struggling right now. We got to do something next. But the brander in me says, listen to people.
Of this podcast is that if anything about that is something that you don't like, you've got to up your game. You've got it's not enough just to say bad or complain. You and the same is true with just leaders in business in general. You can't complain about Gen Z. You can't complain about Gen X because they just are. They just are. No good, no bad, no evil. It is, you have to understand them. And the more you understand them, the more natural empathy you'll develop for them. And as you start to think about, well, what would I be like if these were my formative years? If I was 18 and this is the world that I was being formed in, when I have people in my neighborhood who can't get food stamps, but Jeff Bezos on Instagram is on a $600 million yacht. When I have people in my world around me who can't afford next month's rent, oh, but this guy just spent $50 million on a wedding. That world, and again, I'm not saying that in a judgy way. I'm saying in that.
But I think what you're saying, and maybe I'm putting words into your mouth, but it might be a place where we are also in agreement. If you think about any leader, right, and presumably you have more than just business leaders listening to this.
Right.
When you are a leader, you're called to do something that's supposed to bring a group of people together, so together you can accomplish a goal that you can't accomplish individually. And if you think about a leader's role, there is a mutually beneficial opportunity here, which is if I treat these people well, whether they're my employees or the audience, the consumers, the group that I benefit from by selling a product or service, if I treat them well, then they will treat me well. It's simple story. And, I think this notion of how can a company, especially because there's often profits that you don't necessarily have access to if you are running a university, which are so strapped for cash right now, or a hospital organization similarly struggling. If you look at corporate America, they're doing pretty well. They have been for this entire time. Not all segments, but most segments, right? It's why the stock market has been okay so far. That has happened before. And you have, I lived in Cleveland for a while, and they have all of the different institutions in University Circle and where the Museum of Art is and the Natural History Museum. Amazing, intellectually stimulating community areas for education and betterment of that community. Why? Because old oil money and steel money thought that it was important to give their workers a place to go for enrichment. That's why there's an endowment at the Cleveland Art Museum now, so that anyone that goes still goes for free. That was started back with the Rockefellers. I think that was the Baron name. I'm forgetting. I think we should be doing something like that. And please don't call it socialism. Can we just call it societalism? We're not living alone. And so I think that the terms we're using is making it difficult for us to show up. And I think screen is making it difficult for us to connect. And I think all the systems are burnt down, and we're going to have to do something. And we're all going to have a role to play in that. It's not just the people that we elect.
And business leaders today can't afford, maybe some can, but most can't afford to just put their hands over their ears and say when I talk about culture, I just want to talk about this culture within these four walls, the culture within this bubble, because your employees exist
in the communities, bubble, in families,
and that impacts that bigger culture, and the culture outside of that impacts your employees, it impacts your customers, it impacts your community, and the businesses that are going to be surviving and growing into 2030 and beyond have to look at that much more complex reality. And
you know what? I got to say, politics aside, I'm glad Trump shone a light on a group of people in this country that were feeling left behind. We should all be doing that. Now, it shouldn't just be one group of people. There are tons of groups of people that have historically been left behind that still are challenged to get ahead, whether because of race, creed, education, social class. It still happens. But shouldn't we be looking for those segments and understanding and then building?
I'll tell you what, I live in the middle of red state, North Dakota, and I am as virulently anti much of what Trump stands for as one can imagine. But I live in this community, and I hear the stories, and I hear the pain, and I hear the challenges, and I completely understand the why behind it. So I can empathize and disagree at exactly the same time.
I mean, isn't that life? It's neither black nor white.
Now, where I guess where I'm most disappointed is I think I would hope that others rise up, like meet the moment with equally good branding, with equally good marketing, with equally good messaging, and equally good like intent or reality behind that messaging. And I just, for the most part, have not seen it. And
I think that let's just be honest. For most people, it feels like politics has been hijacked, whether you're on the right or the left. And I think that requires a lot of soul searching. And I've done this thing called Dogma Heresy sessions for a long time now, and the whole purpose of it is to make sure that we're vocalizing and writing down the things that are beliefs that we hold true that maybe were true before, that
Yeah.
are the things that we keep as the basis for what we think we can and cannot do, but we haven't questioned them in a while. And so the first portion of the session is, what are the dogmas? What are the things that we must do in order to be successful? And there are lots of different ways, and whatever the problem is, I change it. And then we start talking about, well, what's the current reality? What has changed? And sometimes it's technology or new companies or distribution or saturation of a marketplace. We identify some human truths, and then we say, okay, what are the heresies? We're not trying to decide what we will do. We're trying to see how many ideas can we come up with what we could do moving forward. And the first rule is, you can't do any of the dogmas. And so if we don't do this thing here, but we know this is true, what could we do? Go. I think that that's one of the most powerful change management sessions that I've ever had the fortune of being able to do. I've been doing this for over 20 years, and hosting it with executives and multinational companies, and it is equal parts cathartic and encouraging, because you have to give yourself permission to do something different before you will do something different. And I think we're stuck right there.
Man, I am so tracking with you. And I talk to a lot of business leaders and even just frontline leaders, people within organizations who will, in one way or another, say the old playbook just isn't working the way it used to. And I can't quite figure out what the new playbook needs to be. And the process you just described essentially forces someone out of their existing reality, because our tendency is to try find ways to put square pegs in square holes. Like, this square peg isn't working in this square hole.
Or to drill another square hole.
Yeah, yes.
Like, well, that's not working. I'm just going to drill the hole over here.
That's right. That's right. And but to actually give up a way of thinking and then open yourself up to a new way, or to define a new way of going to market or going to your customer, that requires a level of deep thinking that many people struggle with. So
well,
I love
I'll tell
hearing
you
your process.
What I love about this, and in fact, what was his name? I think it was a gentleman named Ken Richardson, but don't quote me on that. He had a TED Talk a while ago about essentially two groups of people who were asked to solve a problem. I think it was using, straws and marshmallows and maybe string to build as tall a building as you can. One group did it very well and very quickly, and the other one didn't. They couldn't get it past a couple of layers. The group that did it well were kindergartners, and the group that couldn't do it were executives at a conference. And his whole proposition is, we are naturally born problem solvers, but then we're schooled in a way that tells us one way of thinking is right versus another. And we're programmed and we're incented to perpetuate that. But what it's doing is it's limiting our ability to do problem solving. And I will tell you, every single time that I've done this workshop, everyone has contributed, unless they willingly don't want to, in which case, we have a little bit of conversation like, should they be in the room? But that's for us to handle, not for anyone else. But the notion is that you just got to give people permission, and you have to tell them no decisions are being made, and watch what will happen. Now, sometimes it's not as far as you want it to go, but we can nudge a little bit. We typically do a pre-work.
And that's one of the benefits of having an outside facilitator come in with a fresh set of eyes. Not that you don't have blind spots, but your blind spots would be different. And not that you wouldn't have biases, but yours would be different. So it sometimes can help crack the doors open a little bit. Nudge was the word you used. Sometimes you can nudge in a direction that wouldn't necessarily occur if we're all in the same mix or the same bubble.
Yeah.
So Cat, this always happens with really interesting people. I want to be respectful of your time, so we're going to wrap up here shortly.
That sounds good.
But what always happens with the most interesting people is you get more, like, momentum builds on momentum, builds on momentum, and the conversation gets more and more and more interesting. So I appreciate this, and I will make sure that in the show notes for this session, people who want to get a hold of you, who want to learn more about Koolagi or about your overall approach to brand, they'll be able to get a hold of you either through LinkedIn or through your website. And I'm sure this is the first of many conversations we may have going forward into the future. I really appreciate both the depth and the willingness just to think different about almost everything that has to do with brand. Any final words you would like to share?
Dan, I think first off, it's been such a pleasure having this conversation with you. I've also had a lot of fun. And I think that if I were to wish anything for the folks that are listening, is to have the courage to try something that others haven't, especially when it's grounded in good intention, an informed hunch, or a desire to just shake it up a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
I think that society, business, cultures, companies, countries, they die and wither with inaction. And this is not a time to not act.
And when somebody tries something a little different and it works really well, then there are 1,000 other businesses that say, "Oh, we want to do that thing because that's different." Well, that's not different anymore. You have to come up with your own version of different. So, thank you so much, Kat. This has been fantastic.
Thanks, Dan.